Good evening, everyone. ESBR Boxing, Elliot Greig here, with my esteemed colleague Owen McKendry. And we're here to bring you, I suppose, a preview is the best way to describe it. A preview of 2023 for one fighter and one fighter only. But before I reveal who that fighter is, I want to firstly come to you, Owen, and say, how are you doing, sir? Are you well?
Always good, my friend. Always good. Delighted to be back for another video, and an interesting one.
Excellent. No, it is indeed. And thank you very much for not giving away who we're talking about there. So we're going to go, yeah. So 2020, we've got a lot of content coming out at ESPN at the moment. We've got previews of 2022, I suppose, sorry, previews of 2023, reviews of 2022. And this falls into the preview category. So we're going to take a look at what 2023 may involve for this fighter. And I'm not going to give you his name. First off, I'm going to see if you can guess when I go through and tell you that he fought twice in 2022. Once against Dimitri Bivol and once against Golovkin. Now, for those of you that obviously have already probably guessed, Canelo is the fighter I'm talking about. So Owen, so obviously Canelo is a fighter that no one really needs introduction to. Obviously 58 2-2 record, 39 KOs on there. Obviously fantastic. 32 years old. Unified the super middleweight division. Fought up at light heavies. Fought at middleweight. Fought throughout the divisions and become a decorated champion. So what I'm going to ask you really, I suppose, is we've seen him. If 2022 can be said, we've seen him lose to Bivol, UD loss, which was deserved, but I think
Yep.
surprising in the sense that people thought, Canelo on the cards probably win it. This tends to be how people who have been jaded by boxing tend to think, myself included. But he lost that UD there to Bivol. Then he fought Golovkin, who it's no slander to say is seen his best days essentially.
Yep.
And that was obviously the sort of trilogy fight, super middle, but frankly, probably a weight above Golovkin's where Golovkin really wants to be, and equally Golovkin just didn't look like the Golovkin we've seen previously. So really, what I want to know first and foremost is where do you see Canelo going the next fight, the one after this, because the one after Golovkin, because obviously there's a rematch, there's a potential rematch being talked about with Bivol. Doesn't seem to be too much appetite fan wise for it. But then there's the hashtag Dare to be Great going around as well. Where do you see if you were managing Canelo? Where would you? Obviously, he's had an operation. He's been injured, and is recovering from that. Where would you place him next? Let's take for this video that assume that he fights twice next year. The next fight, where are you taking him?
Where I think he'll be taken and where I would personally take him are two very different things.
Okay.
I think he will get the Bivol rematch. It seems to be all that's on his mind. I think he's the type of fighter that he can't accept a loss. I think it'll eat away at him. Not necessarily affect him performance wise, but I think in the back of his mind, it'll be he's got to get that loss back. Mayweather never got the chance, different kettle of fish. With Bivol, he wanted to test himself, see his like how much weight he could put on, what weights he could go up to. I think light heavy is a step too far. And I think it will play out the same. That's what I think will happen. What I would do, I'd like to see him back down at middleweight, because we've seen Canelo. He can easily do junior now. Sorry, yeah, junior middleweight, and super. I'd like to see him fight Charlo at middleweight. I think that's a fight we've not necessarily been deprived of, but in terms of the names you've got around the weights, I think that's the biggest fight there is. Charlo's not a household name outside of America, really. Neither of the brothers are, despite their records, what they've won, their abilities. I think they're bigger names in America than anywhere else. So if you put Charlo versus Canelo, all the belts at middleweight, I think in Las Vegas, New York, take your pick, it sells. There, and then personally, so I'd go first fight middleweight, then I'd step him back up, dependent on how the year goes, and I'd put him with Benavidez. Benavidez, 26-0. He's probably the only person at super middleweight that's, I don't know what the right word is, that sort of maybe deserves to go in with him. It looks John Ryder might be getting the shout. I think, although it'll be better than Rocky Fielding, I think that'll be a Rocky Fielding-esque easy night for Canelo. Fair play to John Ryder. He's done boxing the hard way, worked his way through. Got the unfortunate stoppage victory over Zach Parker, even though he was roughing him up. Doesn't really appeal to me. Caleb Plant, obviously, on the back of an unbelievable knockout. Don't really want to see Caleb Plant in there with him. So I'd go with, put him in at middleweight for all the bouts with Charlo. vacate all those belts, back up to super middleweight, and put him with Benavidez again for all the belts. But I think it will be John Ryder and Dimitri Bivol in either order. And then for yourself, I'll put it to you again. What you think
Oh,
done,
um,
but what you would do.
yeah.
So first, what you think will happen, but then your actual sort of opinions on what should do.
I think to be honest with you, you smashed that answer. There's not having too much different to add. I think I do agree with you on the sense that I do think he's one of those fighters that doesn't accept loss and almost wants to sort of size the challenge. I do think, and you can give me a thumbs up to this if you know, obviously the scorecards, or thumbs down if you disagree. Um, with Bivol being 115, 113 kind of across, actually sort of flattered Canelo really. Should have been wider than that. So when you sort of look at it and you go, okay, like maybe he's looking at it going, oh, 115, 113, I've only got to make marginal gains to take this belt, when actually he was beaten convincingly. So I don't actually want to see that fight. No, even though I do agree with you, I think there's a high chance it will happen next year, whether it's first or second, whether he wants with the injury to come in, take someone, I suppose, a bit lighter, to sort of feel that back in maybe, and then go Bivol again. I do think Bivol will be one of the two. For me personally, I mean, the second one. I mean, you're looking at some of the names even around. No, Benavidez, I'd like to see that fight. I wouldn't necessarily like to see either. Well, obviously Ryder coming through. You know, Parker recently. I feel like, don't get me wrong, I like John Ryder. I do. I just kind of don't have much of an appetite to see Canelo fight him. I just personally think Canelo would beat John Ryder and be too much for him. Dropping down even into middleweight, Jamal Charlo, fight him. I think there's a victory there. Golovkin's obviously still a champion down in that weight as well. I don't want to see him fight Golovkin again, obviously, but I'm saying out of those names down there, there's what Zanibek, however you say his surname, down there as well. Obviously, he had a performance recently, which against Bentley, which was underwhelming. But people were saying, possibly was purposefully underwhelming to try and land a bigger fight. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But frankly, I think Canelo would have too much for the guys down at middleweight currently.
Yeah.
And even if you want to drop even further, like you were saying, down to super welterweight and fight Charlo, happily see that, like sort of unified versus unified guys, just go at it. That'd be a super fight as well. I'd like to see that, to be honest. I'd like to see him fight someone like Charlo. But equally, I think if you throw him in with kind of any one of those names, like even someone like Andrade, I'd watch it in a weird way. But I kind of feel like Canelo's only really interested in belts, isn't he? So for me, it's either, I think Bivol will be one of the guys that he fights. And then I'd like to personally, even though it's kind of more of, I suppose, a challenging a defense for him in some ways, given the sort of setup of that WBC belt, I think I'd like to see him fight Benavidez after that. But to be honest, we'll see. But what I was going to ask you actually is kind of comes onto this actually, because we mentioned a lot of names there that you'd like to see Canelo fight, almost to the point where you go, what if he fights all of those guys that we've mentioned? That'll tie him up for about 5 years. So I mean, a guy that's like I said, he's had 62 fights. He's only 32 years old, but he started when he was 15 against grown men. Mexicans like Chavez, or even Panamanians like Duran, when you look at their record, have had crazy number of fights. Just seem to go into the 100 plus. How long do you give Canelo? There's been talk, obviously, that he didn't look his best against. Pitch my kid Drew. He didn't look his best against Golovkin, as Golovkin didn't necessarily look his obviously best. Like age will caught up with him, but there's been this kind of thought that actually Canelo might be on the decline.
Mm-hmm.
How long? Well, I'll ask you: do you think that's true? And secondly, how long do you actually give Canelo as a competitor? Do you think he will stretch his record into that crazy kind of sort of Chavez sort of mold, or do you think gets sort of 35, 36 and tap out?
I think Canelo's downfall is his own success, really. I think since the Mayweather loss, no one's touched him, really. Bar Bivol, at his actual weights, light heavy, take light heavy out of the equation because he's not a light heavyweight. Fair play to him for doing David and Goliath, but I think it's insane. But at the middleweights, like your 160s, your 168s, no one touches him. I think he's been that convincing of a champion, and he's just cleaned everyone out. He's gone from super fights with Golovkin to being told you've got to fight Avni Yildirim to get the undisputed fight again to defend your titles. So he goes, okay, no worries, I'll dispose of Yildirim in however little rounds it was. And that's the type of bloke he's been, to be fair to him. Take away his controversies with the meat and whatnot. It's just been, give me someone to fight and I'll fight. So I think his own success will be his downfall. I don't think he's necessarily declining. I think he's got clever as he gets older. You know, as we watch Mayweather transition from Pretty Boy Floyd to Money Mayweather, the knockout artist, which he was and doesn't get credit for, to the hit and don't get hit. I think Canelo's not in the same sense, but moving in that sort of direction to safer boxing, smarter boxing, using his boxing brain and his IQ to just comfortably beat people. So I wouldn't say he's declining. I think, dependent on mentality, I think we could see Canelo until 45. I think he's one of those, you know, your South Americans, your Latinos, you know, just to name a few. You got your Cottos, Margaritos, Maidanas. They didn't necessarily win all their fights at the end of their career, but they just don't go away. Juan Manuel Marquez, like you say, Chavez was 87-0 at one point, and he still carried on fighting even after his losses. These boys, they're just built differently. Like, they turn pro young, they have 4,000 fights, it seems. So it depends on Canelo. He's done more, bar Chavez. The other names we've mentioned, he's done more than those. So it's whether he has the desire, the hunger to carry on at the level he's at. I think we could see him well into his 40s, but I think 37, 38, he's got to be questioning, what more can I actually do in this sport? Although, like Tyson Fury said himself, you know, that you just can't get rid of boxing. You struggle. It's got to get to a point where you must think that there is literally physically nothing more left for me to achieve other than getting beat up by a 22, 23-year-old kid a new kid on the block. So I think we'll see him maybe 37, 38. But if he wants to, he'd definitely be able to carry on into his 40s. I think he'd be stupid to do it, but someone like that, his legacy set in the sport. So whatever he does, it won't be tainted. I just hope he calls it a day at the right time, because I hate seeing fighters that carry on past when they should, and it's just not enjoyable to see, really. But yeah,
we could see
firmly in his court.
We could see, you know, Canelo and Danny Williams at 40 and 60 going. I mean, let me take because you mentioned legacy there, actually, and it's a nice sort of transition. You know, as we transition from 2022 into 2023, we'll transition into Canelo's. Obviously, the pound for pound list is in flux, isn't it? Constantly, you know, every someone gets a victory, they seem to shoot up. Crawford got a victory against, you know, Evan Eason the other week, and now all of a sudden he's number one. Wherever Usyk beats Joshua, he's number one, and that's kind of, you know, Fury knocks over White, whether he's number one. So it just kind of goes round and round in this way. But where at this moment in time, so coming to end, like I said, 2022 into 2023, where do you place Canelo in that sort of pound for pound, current pound for pound conversation? Is he top 5 for you, top 10 for you? Whereabouts roughly against some of those names, you know, like an Inoue, Crawford, Spence, those other sort of guys? Where do you rate him against those?
For me, I think I've got Inoue as pound for pound number one at the moment, purely because he's just cleaning his division out like so convincingly. It's actually quite scary. That for me is what establishes yourself pound for pound number one. I love Crawford, he's unbeaten, but he hasn't had the super fights. Don't get me wrong, David Avanesian, you know, he absolutely smashed up Josh Kelly, who was tipped as a world champion. He was on like a 6-fight knockout streak. So fair enough, European champ, get him in there, but it's not the legacy defining fights, you know, like against your Spencers, even like your Ugases, them style fights. So I would personally, although he lost to Bivol, I don't really have it affecting him too much. I'll still have him top 5. Because I think when you go into a fight like that, where he's not realistically, as for me and yourself, you know, anyone in the group I think will agree, from a boxing hardcore point of view, no one expected Canelo to beat Bivol within the hardcore sort of thing. If he'd done it, it would have been literally take my hat off to him. That is an unbelievable achievement. So I've seen him, as soon as he lost, I've seen him in people's rankings slide from number 1 to about number 8. But for me, it just adds to his legacy, the fact he's been able to put the weight on to compete. Although he did get beat convincingly, he weren't landing, and he wasn't in the fight at times. So I'd still have him top 5. And personally, I think it's harsh to say he wouldn't, like, I've seen him at 8, 9, 10, even out of some pounds because he stepped up to take a mammoth challenge on and lost. So yeah, I'd still have him number 5. I don't know about yourself. Well, not necessarily number 5, but in and around the top 5. And yeah, personally, I don't see the Bivol loss affecting his status too much.
Yeah, and I think for people that like to see disagreement in videos, they're not going to find it here because I actually agree with everything you were saying. Essentially, I think like anyway, it's hard. It's hard obviously anyway. You've seen him be so destructive now against guys that are highly ranked in and around his divisions, just clearing people out. I just think obviously Usyk again. It's hard. I'll probably put Usyk still up there just because obviously what he did at cruiserweight and then obviously at heavyweight now. And if he fights and if he beats Fury, which I don't think he will, but if he does, even if he beats Wilder as well, I'd almost have him as sort of like a generational number one for my own sort of age group as it is. But I think Crawford and Spence, obviously I see those guys as both talented, but I almost feel like you're right. I feel like Canelo for me, he's wiped out better names and he's gone up and down and he's done it more. Like Crawford, you can sit there and go, like Crawford's what, 30 odd fights, and just like coming to almost the end of his career, and you're sitting there going, like, you need some big fights. You need some actually like career defining fights because the better sort of wins almost came in the early on in your career. You got that Sean Porter victory, but you've beaten Amir Khan and Brook when they were completely finished. Spence has got some better wins, frankly, but I don't think he outdoes Canelo in that way. So I'd probably actually personally, even though he lost to Bivol, didn't look his best potentially against Golovkin, I still have Canelo. But he's had a lot of hard fights in a row. I'd have him probably still at 3, just for the kind of, like you say, the legacy and the fact that he's just cleaned out divisions and taken on challenges which we don't see very often in boxing. I suppose that's testament, isn't it, to the power of the money behind him as well, that he feels comfortable and able to sort of take these things on rather than if he gets a loss, he'll be poverty stricken and fighting shows of 6 rounders. So yeah, I'd have him up at 3 personally. But again, like we've said in this video, it's going to be exciting to see what happens next year. Owen. I think whichever way Canelo goes is exciting, isn't it? Frankly, one of the biggest names in the sport. So yeah, Chuck, as we've said in other videos, which no doubt you've seen, if you think I'm wrong, think Owen's wrong, put the comments beneath. If you think we're talking rubbish, put the comments. I think if you agree with this, give us a thumbs up. It'd be quite nice to see some of those. We've obviously got other content coming out. ESBR boxing over this period, previews of other fighters' years, reviews of the year that's just gone by. Owen, I'm going to come to you now and say, do you have any final comments about this video? And if not, if you'd just like to wish our viewers well, then we'll bid everyone farewell.
Yeah, no, the only sort of comment I'd add is I'm always excited to see a Canelo fight. As long as it's not an Anthony Yildirim, as long as it's competitive. Hopefully we see him out early, but obviously the shoulder injuries. Probably won't see him till March, April time. But yeah, anyone has, I know Canelo is always a bit of a touchy subject, so I'd like to see some viewers' opinions on Canelo and where he goes next year.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, thank you, Aaron. Thank you for joining me, and thank you guys for watching. And we'll see you guys with more content soon.